Well, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome today's guest, Richard Mann, high performance coach and the founder of Man on a Mission. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hi Ross, how are you?
Really good. Now, obviously, everybody doesn't know this, but we connected in another group recently, only a couple of months back. And I think we really got on and connected around this idea of being the best version of yourself. And I know we've chatted on your podcast and just behind the scenes about this idea of being the best version of yourself. But for anyone who hasn't come across you and the work that you do, who is Richard Mann?
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, absolutely. I think when we met, there was things firing off in all directions. One there is I'm into this, and yes, into that. And absolutely, at the core of what I do as well is that best version of what someone is and how they perform. So, that's the performance coaching. I suppose the background to that originally was I was always very highly driven in sport, which originally, when I was a kid, it was originally football, and then into Thai boxing, training with really elite athletes prior to then joining the Royal Marines, and it was that sort of background for me of seeing some of the elite athletes. I'm thinking of a particular fighter that I used to train with. And seeing his performance was just sort of mesmerizing to me, and it was so it was very much a physical aspect of performance. 17, I joined the Royal Marines, which was a shock to the system, to say the least. Obviously, it was my choice, but it was just the shock of capture almost. To go from the village and the home at 17 to then Lympstone Commando Training Centre, no previous background, didn't really know anybody in the military either. And I just landed at Lympstone. Terrified is probably the best way of saying it. And I think I've come to realise that everybody else was really pretty much. But yeah, it's a daunting place to turn up to. And I think that you come in on the train as you arrive into Lympstone Commando Training Centre. On your left-hand side, any Marines listening to this would recognise it straight away. There's the assault course on the left-hand side, which is going to be that torture in the coming weeks. So yeah, that was the first part of the Marines. I passed Marines training, went to 4-2 Commando Royal Marines for approximately about 4 years, but then there was the sort of itch to do more, and went on Special Forces selection, and there's two areas you could go, really, SAS or SBS, and I went into the SBS, which is Special Boat Service. Some sort of famous ex-colleagues on the TV now, some of the friends that I have, but I spent 10 years in the SBS, which was pretty amazing, really, looking back on that particularly. The experiences and the challenges and so on. Great life experience. Left the military though, so I wanted to move on because I'd been in since the age of 17, and there was something irking me or pulling me towards trying something different. At the time, a lot of people were working in private security out in post-war Iraq at the time, and so I sort of went out there in this hostile environment. I never intended to, but the money was quite good at the time, so that came calling. And we were, running around looking after CBS, ABC news crews, and in a very lawless post-war Iraq, for on and off for a few years, and then into all sorts of different spurious things that we were doing, whether it was surveillance, whether it was anti-piracy, look after some high net worth clients in the more glitzy glam of Saint-Tropez.
Wow.
So there was that whole thing. And I think overall though, that what was really sort of calling me throughout all of it, I'd still been involved in martial arts because that was a lot and is a love of mine. And it was always about I suppose what limits me and what do I need to be at my best. There was a pursuit of that, not always a healthy pursuit, but a pursuit of that. And that led me down roads of, I would say, amateurish, psychology, if you like. And then I then started to transition from the private security into leadership and performance with organizations and teams. Went into coaching, a sort of formal coaching qualification, but then moved more towards performance psychology. Studied with world-leading performance psychologist Dr. Don Green, who's my mentor, and then sort of developed my own high performance processes from that, and insights and thinking and approaches. And so I've been doing that for a number of years now at Man on a Mission, with athletes, business leaders, to help them manage stress and pressure more effectively, to perform when it's needed, when it matters, in consequential environments. And that's the work to date.
Brilliant. What a journey you've been on. And it's interesting that you started out in sport, went through the military, SBS, and then you ended up in psychology. And I guess a lot of people, when they think of the SAS, SBS, think of the physicality of it. I'm thinking of the log runs and the Navy SEALs when you see them doing the flutter kicks in the water and things like that. But how much of it is psychological? How much of it is psychology, and how much of it is your physical strength?
Do you know what? I'm thinking about a boxer that I worked with, a world elite boxer, and and I asked a similar sort of question to him. On fight night, how is mental? And without hesitation, he was 90%. 90% without hesitation. And I would go along the same. The process is it's not about being an elite athlete, about physicality really in some way. Yes, you've got to be physical, but the vast majority of it is mental. 100%. People talk themselves out of it. I remember when we were on selection process, and we went to the jungle, and it's a joint at that point SAS SBS thing, and every morning you walk up to the schoolhouse, and you go into this area where everyone sort of meets up, and on the left hand side there's the area where the people are quitting, people that are going to get a helicopter and a nice warm shower and comfort. And certainly initially people were leaving in the droves, and I was kind of, I'd look at it, take strength from it personally, because I'd look at that and think, well, I ain't quitting. It would drive me on more. And two, also a recognition that really capable guys, just for whatever reason, were able to talk out of continuing. And I think that was, I've said to a few people that there was an option in quitting in this example in the jungle. But I've often said, if we were in 4-2 Commando and they said, you're going into that jungle for 5 weeks, there's no quitting option. You just get on with it. It wouldn't be an option in the mind.
Yeah. But I guess at that moment there was an option, but for you, it never even entered your mind.
No, there was never. Don't get me wrong. There were some moments where you were just like, "What the hell?" It's like really low moments, really low. Never. I'm going to quit. And
what made you carry on? When there were those moments when you thought, "What am I doing here?" Like, you looked around yourself. What was it that drove you on? What was it that gave you that internal drive?
I've thought a lot about this, Ross, and I've come to realise and understand that when moments, for me personally, that is when I when I become stronger. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm perfect and in a sort of bullshitty listen to me type of way, but actually the negativity that I have in my mind drops away at that point when you're at sort of rock bottom. And actually, again, my honest answer to that is that when it starts to get really tough, and my narrative in my head was, this is where I kick in. This is where I can go more. And I personally believed that I could go deeper and further than other people. And
it gave me goosebumps there. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it was found, but in the performance psychology world, and really looking at it now and understanding it more, it's not about bullshit positivity, media and so on and so forth. It was. I go back to the Thai boxing sessions that I was doing before I joined, which were brutal, really brutal sessions. We were doing 3-hour sessions and I was a young lad, with really top in UK, and you'd literally be sort of collapsing on the floor before sparring, at the end of it, and I knew that I could go that deep, but you do that through the actual doing of the task itself, and from training yourself in that way. And then when I came to joining the Marines, like I said, I'm not trying to paint this as like I'm Mr. Positivity, because I wasn't. I was very almost like panic man in training, really, really concerned about the training team and a lot of negativity. But when it came to the actual, like for instance, the commando tests, and it was like the 30 miler, and we had the pack, which was the big pack to carry, and that was one pack between the section. I put that pack on my back, I'd be ahead of everybody else, despite the fact I was carrying more weight, because at that point the determination had kicked in, and ultimately it was a dropping away of the negative talk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like you had to step up a gear.
Sorry, Ross.
Like you had to step up a gear at that point. Like you've got to go to the next level.
Yeah, it necessitated almost in the moment to, for the negative mind to just drop away into that sort of, right, let's go. Now I'm pushing. Now I can go deeper. Now I can go further. And I've noticed the same thing. For instance, if when I was when I first started jiu-jitsu years ago, I find that I'd get super. It was actually a sort of MMA gym that I was going to at the time, rather than just pure Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I would be like nervous before the session, not scared of anybody else, and this, that, and the other. Probably my own self-critic. I would feel sort of anxious, and then getting that first round, and it would be like, oh, I'm feeling kind of negative, and then that other part kicks in, and then by the end of the first round, I'm looking for the most challenging person in the gym to take them on. So I've been described as a paradox, I suppose. Yeah.
How much of that, and I guess it's a great question for you as a coach, but how much of that is innate and how much of that can be taught? Because it sounds like it's just who you are, but I'm guessing from a coaching perspective, there must be an element of this that can be controlled and can be taught to people.
Yeah, God, it's a great question. I don't have a full answer, because it's like you said. I suppose it's all I've ever known. I've been driven in that way. It's like when I was a kid, playing football, I'd just go and spend hours juggling a football in the back garden, and it was all just to be better, to get better at football. So driven in that way. Although having having then, the system of for instance, in the Marines or the SBS, is a great system for bringing the best out of people and driving people towards those levels as well. So I suppose you would say, yes, I use a phrase of saying that biology scales. We're all very different, maybe at the surface level, whatever race, creed, whatever we come from. But actually underneath, biology really scales and drives us as human beings. And I think, for me, I like to think that is then, not just something that's in me, but in any one of us. And I think, we do that through basically pushing our boundaries a little bit and actually then starting to, a big believer, obviously, in the power of the mind, is then to really understand that I can go deeper. And everybody can do that from my perspective. I've got a friend at the moment, for example, who has just got into cold water swimming at this sort of time of year. It brings back horror memories of selection process for SBS as well, when you'd be out running every morning, not knowing if you're swimming in the lake or, cold water. But, he's basically gone into the cold water and he's like, Jesus, I'm going to die. That's what his mind's really telling him. And then there's some sort of, older ladies, let's say, that are sort of nonchalantly sort of swimming past him, and he's like, oh, I'm not going to die. And actually I can progress. And I suppose I say that because I think I'm a firm believer in the people I work with, you can develop yourself in beyond the limitations of what we believe is possible at the moment.
I remember the first time I did a Wim Hof session and got into the water, and I was like, wanted to get back out. And then within a couple of times of going, you just in the water, actually feeling quite warm. It's amazing what the mind can do in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, when if it's the pursuit of, maybe people listening, whether it's the pursuit of sports, whether it's in business, again, we really pull ourselves short of thinking where we can actually go, and for lots of reasons, self-protect mechanisms that are deeply ingrained within us to put that limiter on us. And again, not to be said in a I keep using the phrase of bullshit way, but actually based in reality. We have to base the development of ourselves I believe in reality, so that we've actually taken the actions and the steps. We can't bullshit the mind, and we can't just try and convince ourselves of something. So, but at the same time, we can take steps towards that. I think I was mentioning to someone the other day. It's like my eldest son, when he was playing rugby, and he was first in this, and he was doing a sort of sidestep, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've got sidestep," and he had a great sidestep on him, and I was like, "Yeah, you can go more." He goes, and he was like, "No, I can't," and I was like, "Finn, you're probably doing 40% at best," and he was like, and then eventually he started to go for it more, and then eventually he got really dramatic, and he went bang bang on this sidestep, and I'm like that. Now that's that's getting to the edge of your capability more so. But again, it was just that limiting belief that it's the belief that we feel like we're pushing, but actually, as you would attest to on your mountains and so on, Ross, you'll have been through this. You'll have known the limits, I'm sure.
Without a doubt, yeah. And I resonated a little with what you said earlier, because there'll usually be a moment on every mountain I've been on where I thought, what am I doing here? Like, this is supposed to be fun, but it's hard. Like, and then all of a sudden, you reveal another part of yourself that actually is like, hang on a minute, I've signed up for this. this is about seeing what I'm capable of. It's about demonstrating to my children that they can do anything they set their mind to. And all of a sudden you get a moment of clarity, and maybe another hour or 2 hours or half an hour of calm or stillness. And then perhaps some negativity creeps back in again, because as you say, it's not about just telling yourself positive things. It's about believing it, which I think gives you that energy or ability to carry on. So yeah, I totally got what you were talking about before. I was like, yeah, I remember that feeling.
Yeah. And it's, it's a shift. It's with my mentor, Dr. Don Green, we spoke about sometimes these are incremental shifts and sometimes they're paradigm shifts where actually it's like, oh, wow, I can do that.
Yeah.
And again, once that is in the known, if you like, then we can't unknow it. So so I suppose the game within the game, my focus and I guess yours is people to really themselves is to come from an internal perspective rather than to be constantly dictated to by the external environment. And that, I wish I'd known that years ago, because I was so influenced by the threat of the training team or not being good enough at that point, or them doing this, but really the shift change for me is an internal perspective, doing the deeper inner work.
Yeah, you used a really interesting word there. You used the word game, and I've heard a lot of coaches and people I admire talk about life as a game. And when you work on yourself, it's like you're leveling up the hardware in your computer, so the game gets easier, because you've got more skills, if you like. You've just beaten the boss and you've gone up a level. It's that game gets easier. I think it's a curious word to use, but it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gamification of life, I suppose. Yeah, like you're saying there. One of the ways that I like to think about that is lessening. It's kind of a counterintuitive approach, but lessening expectation on ourselves, which ultimately causes levels of resistance and tension. And so often in life, we're just through our upbringing, that sort of do more mentality. It's push harder, try harder, and you see people on a run, they're like, you look at it and you see the game within a game with all aspects, business, sports, whatever. I mean, I'm minded to think, I'm sure you've heard of the Inner Game series. Have you heard of Tim Galway?
Oh no, I haven't. No, I lost you there for a moment, but I've not heard of Tim.
Yeah, Tim Galway. I think he's died now, but his original book, I read it some years ago, and it was like, whoa! It was like the inner game of tennis. And I'm not a tennis player by any. I'm not even pick up a racket. Not at all. It wasn't about tennis, but yeah. But he very much. He was a tennis coach, and he recognised that a lot of tennis coaches were hold the racket here, do this, put your foot there, blah blah blah, do and he was doing that. And I think he said at one point he just got sick of hearing himself say these things, so he just kind of sort of said, hit it into that quadrant of the tennis court over there, and the people were able to adapt. What he described as self one and self two, and self two being the instinctive and capable part of us, and self one being the critic and the noise of the mind again that we're talking about there. So he was talking about the game, the inner game.
But you got the game. I guess the first one then is you can't do that. you're going to give up. Like, just don't even try. And then the other part is like, actually, if you let them get on with it, they could keep going forever.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times is we're getting in our own way. I just look at the way that sort of society is, and I know this is from an approach of just looking and observing, and it's not that I've got everything dialed in, far from it, but it's a work in progress, and I'm committed on that road. And it's not to get to some fixed end point of, oh, now I'm sorted, which is actually false in itself. To think that would ever be the case. That we would be a fixed entity that is now actualized, but really that we are in the process of becoming at any one stage in our life. We're all going to hit challenges, death, the divorces, businesses breaking up, and again, I've been through those things, and I, for me, part of the work is about being the best version of yourself. Is not just a throwaway comment of a surface level comment. It's about, yes, performance and delivering on demand under pressure, but when needed. But it's also about people's experience of life and being able to manage and navigate more effectively the challenges and the brutality. It's brutal life for people. And what people can actually deal with, it just staggers you. It's amazing, really.
Yeah.
And yet we create so much of our own stress, so much of our own dysfunction and in life, I think, and that's, even if we could drop away some of those processes, some of those things that we're doing and behaviors, then that would be a step change.
Yeah, we do get in our own way, don't we? I remember a couple of steps that happened in my own business journey, and one was before many years ago when our business was stuck and we couldn't get past $1 million in revenue, and it was a psychological thing. Like, I didn't believe that I was capable of that. And then years after that, we'd left that behind, and we were going for another level in business. And I was all of a sudden in meetings with people talking about tens and hundreds of millions. And I remember shrinking back from those first meetings and thinking, how am I here? And do I deserve to be here? Like, why are these people talking to me? And I remember talking to my coach at the time, going, like, I don't deserve to be here. And he was like, of course you do. Like, you're in that room on purpose. You've put yourself in that room. So you need to own it, and you need to accept that they are the conversations you're having now. And it was totally psychological. It just took that shift of, oh yeah, actually I can do that. And that's just a number. That's all it is. It's all in here that the big problem is.
God, yeah. I suppose most people have heard of it. What was coming up in my head, as you're saying, it was the Roger Bannister thing, wasn't it, with the 4-minute mile?
Yeah, he did it, and then everybody did it.
It's what, sorry?
He did it, and then everybody did it.
Yeah, it's very cliche to use Roger Bannister, but it's the same thing. It's that sort of limitation of knowing that we can push that much further. I remember when we were on selection, we did something called a portage, which is probably, I think if you ask most of the lads, they would say that's probably the most brutal thing that we did. One of the most brutal things. And it's a 9-mile speed march, but the portage is with all your kit that you're out in the field with, but then you've got these canoes. It's like a klepper canoe. And there's the what they call the stringers, which is the frame of the canoe, and then the skin of the canoe. And it's a horrific way where with them on and all your kit as well. And we came down into this village in Dorset there where we were doing the selection, and I always remember sort of going along. We're probably at about mile 7 or something, literally hanging in there. And there's a woman on the side of the road. She goes, "You can't do that to them. It's immoral." And she's like, to which one of the instructors shouted, "They're all volunteers, you know." But again, it was that sort of limitation of mind is going to really get you. But we're saying the same thing. You can go much further than we really believe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you said, you work with sports people and business owners and CEOs to help them excel and find that next level in themselves.
Yeah. And I've been fortunate enough, 3 people I know to have worked in Premiership football, some work there, worked with elite boxers, the sort of world level. That was through Loughborough University originally. It was quite sort of close to me, and again, I love athletics and so on. So it's a big interest of mine as well. Anyway, with training myself and also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters as well, which is and I'm thinking of one guy in particular. I worked with him, and he was a fascinating. As an example, I'm thinking of him as just a fascinating guy to work with. Great guy, top 10 in the world fight. The margins become so much. I think the principles are the same, and I'm not here to put athletes on a pedestal really, because they all sort of flounder around it. For instance, I would say that sometimes you've got like Premier League footballers, and something could go wrong within the first part of the game, and it's almost like this passive. Oh, it's going to be one of them games, and I'm like, right. So you've got no agency, or you've got no control. It's almost like it's decreed from the gods that today is going to be a bad game, which is obviously, as I say, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that is about, again, working from the inside. How do I take control? How do I work on my terms? How do I perform? And again, going back to the sort of the jiu-jitsu guy there, we really started to delve deeply. We got really deep in the weeds of his performance. And again, that isn't about further complexity. That is about really becoming really clear on what it is that drives him to be his best in those moments. And then setting the conditions and priming, being able to prime towards those ideal performance states more often. And that's really the work of that. And and it's not always perfect. It might be that it didn't happen or didn't work, or the focus was distracted. But I'm thinking of one example he gave me where he was training, and he's training with another really elite fighter. But most of the time he would beat this guy. They're really going sort of like full on, but he'd beat him all the time. And so they're there, and it's his academy, and he's there on the mats fighting this guy. And as he's fighting, the door opens and a couple of the students walk in, and he's basically said, in his mind's gone, "Oh, students," and he's gone, "Oh, I'd hate to," the negativity came in and said, "I'd hate to mess up in front of the students," and just by the virtue of the fact, all of a sudden he's come out of the moment, he's out of the moment now. And in the meantime, this other guy has come around the back, blah, blah, took his back, choked him out. The worst scenario has happened. He's now tapping out in front of his students as they walk in.
Wow.
And it was just all about, focus, being present, being in the moment, and the learning of the athletes. But just to finish that point is to say that, for me, the margins become finer. Again, at that elite level, it's going to happen like that. Just the very, very fine margins of we're either on performance, off, our best performance. But ultimately, as that sort of cascades down into other people, whether it's businesses or anybody. The principles are the same ultimately.
Yeah. I remember having a golf lesson once, and the golf coach that I had said, if you ever really want to mess with your friends when you're playing golf, ask them if they're holding the club differently, because whatever they're doing, it's really working today. He said, and they'll just start thinking about how they are holding the club, and he said it'll all go to pieces. And it was really interesting because it's all in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because it is actually, I've got a couple of thoughts on that one. Speaking of golf, my dad was a keen golfer, and when I was a little kid, he sort of took me up the golf club, and he puts the ball down. I've never played golf before. He puts the ball down on the tee, and he goes, "Oh, just hit it over there somewhere." So I was like, "Okay." Wallop. Woof, this he's like, bloody hell. Kind of spoke like that. Puts the next ball down. Boom. And I just kept smashing it. And you could see him. He was like that. So he comes home and he's like, my mum's there. How'd you go on? Well, he could hardly contain himself. He's like, oh, he's a bloody natural. Bloody natural. He's like, he got himself the next protege. You know, I'm going to be amazing. So a couple of nights later, he's like, should we go to the club again? So I was like, yeah. So we get up there. He's like that. He goes, you did really well the other night, but just to give you a few points, you need to move your foot here. You need to change this. You need to put your arm across here. On the backswing, you need to do. I'm like, hack. And I could see him sort of deflating with every hack of the club as I was trying to hit. And all of a sudden, what became a very natural process had now become something that ultimately the gears there was sand in the gears all of a sudden, and it wasn't working. In an even more basic story, and a lot of military people, if any military people listening would know this, but there's a phenomenon of TikToking, which is ultimately overthinking. As we would normally walk and not really think about it, and marching's an extension of walking, if you want to call it that. You know, so when we'd walk, the left foot would go forward. We do it in opposites. And TikToking is ultimately when someone starts marching and the left arm and the left leg are moving together. So we're very awkwardly marching in this way, and it's basically someone that's just overthinking again, and again that's sand in the gears. The most basic of things we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm imagining all the times I've had like dancing lessons and things there, and I'm overthinking it and going right when I'm supposed to go left and things like that.
Yeah. You need a few drinks to get dancing, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody is watching and they think, wow, I really want to work with Richard, I've got another level to find either in my sport or at work, how do they get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me via LinkedIn, and I can send a link for that. But yeah, Richard Mann on a Mission on LinkedIn. The website www.mannonamission, MANN, which is my surname, Mann on a Mission. I didn't come up with that name, by the way. Somebody else gave it me, and I thought, I'll take that. Yeah, that's quite good. mannonamission.uk, just .uk. So there's a couple of options as well. I'm not. I've had a sort of probably 3-year hiatus off social media, so I'm not on it a lot. Media.
Brilliant. We'll make sure we put all of those links on here when this goes out. And as I said before, this will probably go out next week. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.